Hi, everyone. Welcome back. This week, we want to talk about stress versus anxiety. So let's jump in. And just as a reminder, as we're talking about these topics, there are lots of resources for you in the notes section. But there is a difference between stress and anxiety, and we want to help you understand that so that you can help others. And when we think about stress and anxiety, we know that this has a lot to do with mental health. We all experience stress. It's quite normal. Anxiety is different in that anxiety is inevitable when we have long-term stress or chronic stress, and we're experiencing the impact of stress in a way that is ongoing and hasn't been resolved. So we'll jump into this a little further in just a moment. So both stress and anxiety occur in children and adults. This is quite normal, to be honest. And stress and anxiety can become chronic when the situation that's triggering the stress is unpredictable. So when someone feels like a situation is out of their control, they really don't see the options in front of them, that's when we can experience more chronic stress, which ultimately leads to anxiety. And so over time, this begins to have an impact on a person's physical and mental health. So why do we even experience these feelings? Well, it's quite normal. It actually is because our brain's job is to protect us. And prior to modern times, our brain was really protecting us from real threats in the environment. And our brains were designed to scan and look for threats. But now in modern times, we still get the same signal to our amygdala when someone makes a comment that's upsetting to us as we might have felt in historic times when a tiger was chasing you. So there's really not a difference in our body's response because our brains don't really know if the threat is real, like a tiger, or if it's not a real threat, it's just a comment, but it had an impact on us. And either way, we feel it in our nervous system. It kind of puts us on high alert. And the brain hasn't figured out how to work through that unless we help ourselves work through that feeling in our nervous system. So our body will ultimately go into that fight, flight, or freeze response as a form of protection, even over something as simple as a comment or someone looking at you in a way that makes you feel really uncomfortable. And so our awareness is then heightened and we can start to feel muscle tension. And depending on how we respond, whether we, are someone who's going to freeze, we might feel like we want to hide, or we are someone who wants to fight and we feel more aggressive and angry. Either way, this is all about muscle tension. It actually is happening in our bodies one way or the other. Even though our response or reaction, our outward response or reaction might be different, our bodies feel it in the same way. So in general, when we encounter these threats, as we talked about, it's hard for our brains to figure out exactly what's real and what isn't real. There's a movie clip here from the movie Inside Out, and this is an opportunity to share with parents, caregivers, even your students, a chance to look at the movie clip and really think about emotions. So we want to utilize this as examples of stress response. And the question is, how are the mom, dad, and daughter responding to a recent move in a new city? There are also notes in this slide deck to help you set this up and frame it, but it's a really great interactive activity to get kids and adults talking about emotions and stress. This is a copy of the hand-brain model. And what you notice on the left of your screen is that it's really about using your hand to describe the brain. So with younger children, utilizing the hand as a way to describe the brain makes it super simple. They can understand that the brain stem is the lizard brain that's, at the bottom of your hand there. And that's where, that safety and survival response is happening. And sometimes it makes us feel really angry or makes us want to shut down. And then in the middle, that's your limbic system. That's your emotional reasoning center. And we want to work to calm our system down using the limbic system, and relationships the power of relationships is really strong here in the limbic system, because when we have strong relationships or we learn strategies for emotional regulation, that's when we begin to calm down and we get back to the cortex, which is the good stuff, which is the prefrontal cortex where learning and thinking happens. So feel free to use either one of these to be able to explain that to children. And here's yet just another example, again, with notes for you of how you might explain the brain model, or the brain rather, using the hand brain model. So most people experience stress or anxiety at some point in their lives. That's quite normal. But let's look at how they're similar and how they're different. So first of all, stress is an emotional response. We talked about that. You feel it in your body. Maybe you're getting headaches or you're having trouble sleeping. And sometimes stress is not a bad thing. So we don't want to have no stress in our lives. It can be a motivator. And that's true for anxiety as well. Sometimes I can tell you personally, when I start ruminating on something and I'm beginning to feel anxious and I'm thinking so far ahead into the future, I need to get up and get things done and feel like I have a little bit of control. And that helps to reduce the symptoms a little bit. So it's not always bad. But sometimes we need to be aware of their differences and what we can do to support ourselves and others. So keep in mind that stress is a response to an external cause. So something externally has happened, and when the problem goes away, the stress goes away. Anxiety is a little bit different. This is persistent feelings of dread and uneasiness and feeling of being in threat when there's not actually an immediate threat. So a lot of times anxiety is thinking about the future, and it's really ruminating on situations that maybe aren't actually a threat, but we've made them feel like a threat in our minds. And these symptoms can be long lasting and begin to interfere with our lives. So they're similar but different. And again, we want to make sure that we know that if a child or caregiver or yourself is experiencing a stress response that occurs for a long time, it's persistent and it's disproportionate to the actual situation of what's actually happening, it can be really important to get help. And so we want to make sure that we're really clear that we're not clinicians. We want to make sure that we're constantly reminding people that if this has been going on for a while, it's important to talk to a clinician, talk to a therapist, and get support. Some of this is about that disproportionate stress or disproportionate worry to the actual situation. And so using strategies like cognitive behavior therapy or things that you can learn from working with a therapist can also really help with coping and reducing symptoms. Mindfulness is really empowering. Mindfulness isn't just a buzzword. It really is about shifting our response in the brain and being able to navigate our attention and be able to work through it. It's a lot of thought management. There's a video up here where it says how mindfulness empowers us. So feel free to watch that or share it with others. And really, just as a reminder, mindfulness is not just about breathing, although breathing is helpful. It's really about paying attention to the present moment, accepting how you're feeling in a non-judgmental manner, and really allowing yourself the opportunity to be present so that you're not ruminating and feeling stuck in the future. There's a guided imagery activity here that you could utilize with caregivers, students, your colleagues, or yourself. And if you click on that hot cocoa link, it takes you to a guided imagery example. This would be a good example of being able to apply mindfulness to help you take a break from the anxiety and stay in the present moment. We hope that you've learned something new today. As always, please reach out if you have any questions, and we look forward to seeing you back. Hey everyone, thanks for listening. If you're looking to cultivate more calm in your school or classroom, check us out at calmerschools.com. That's www.calmerschools.com. We'd love to provide an in-person workshop or tell you more about our digital library, which is an on-demand platform filled with strategies for cultivating more calm and responding appropriately and effectively to students who've experienced trauma. Reach out to us so we can talk about a way to help your school or classroom become a place of calm.